The sound of a shotgun blast tore through the still Montana air, sending a flock of starlings into the sky as Owen McAllister pulled his chestnut mare to a halt at the edge of the dilapidated Hargrove property. It was the spring of 1878, and Owen hadn't planned on stopping at the abandoned homestead, but the gunshot changed everything. Standing in his stirrups, he scanned the overgrown yard, his hand resting on the Colt revolver at his hip. "Hello?" he called out, his voice carrying across the neglected land. "Anyone there?" No answer came, but Owen's instincts told him something wasn't right. He'd been riding the Montana Territory for nearly 8 years now, ever since leaving his family's failing farm in Missouri at the age of 20. The life of a cowhand suited him, the open plains, the honest work, and the freedom to move on when the mood struck. He'd signed on with the Rocking M Ranch just 3 months prior and was on his way back from delivering a message to a neighboring spread. Swinging down from his saddle, Owen tied his mare to a fence post and approached the main house cautiously. The Hargrove place had been abandoned for nearly a year, ever since Old Man Hargrove died of pneumonia, and his son decided to sell off the livestock and head to California. The house stood silent, its windows dark and empty. A second shot rang out, this one coming from behind the house. Owen drew his revolver and moved swiftly toward the sound, keeping low and using the overgrown shrubs as cover. As he rounded the corner of the house, he spotted a man standing outside a chicken coop, aiming a shotgun at the small structure. "Get out here! You thieving witch!" the man shouted, his words slurred. Even from a distance, Owen could smell the whiskey on him. "Hold it right there," Owen called out, his revolver trained on the drunk. "Lower that shotgun." The man whirled around, nearly losing his balance in the process. His face was weathered and pockmarked, his clothes filthy. "This ain't your concern, cowboy. Move along." "I said lower the weapon," Owen repeated, stepping closer. "What's going on here?" "Caught a thief," the man said, gesturing to the chicken coop with his shotgun. "Been stealing eggs and chickens for days. Gonna teach her a lesson?" Her. The word caught Owen's attention immediately. "You've got a woman locked in there?" "Ain't no woman. She's a thief and a witch, probably an Indian half-breed. Found her sneaking around my property." "Your property?" Owen asked, his eyes narrowing. "This is the Hargrove place. Far as I know, it's been abandoned." "I'm watching it for the new owners," the man replied unconvincingly. "Now get going. This ain't your business." Owen stepped forward, his revolver still pointed at the drunk. "I'm making it my business. Open that coop." For a moment, the man looked like he might resist, but something in Owen's steady gaze made him reconsider. He lowered the shotgun reluctantly. "Fine. Take the thief if you want her. She ain't worth the trouble anyhow." The man stumbled to the chicken coop and lifted the crude wooden latch. As the door swung open, Owen kept his revolver trained on the drunk, unsure what to expect. A young woman emerged slowly from the small structure. Blinking in the bright sunlight, her dress was torn and dirty, her dark hair hanging in tangles around her face. Despite the dirt and grime, Owen could see she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and striking green eyes that regarded him warily. "You all right, miss?" Owen asked, not lowering his weapon. She nodded slightly but said nothing, keeping her distance from both men. "She don't talk much," the drunk sneered. "Took her food and water. That's more than a thief deserves." Owen's jaw tightened. "How long has she been in there?" "Couple days. Caught her stealing my chickens." "These aren't your chickens," Owen said, his patience wearing thin. "And I doubt they're even alive after a year of neglect." The woman spoke then, her voice hoarse but clear. 3 days. He locked me in 3 days ago when I was passing through. I wasn't stealing anything." Owen made a quick decision. "Miss, gather whatever belongs to you. You're coming with me." "Now wait just a minute," the drunk protested, raising his shotgun slightly. Owen cocked his revolver. "That would be a mistake. The lady is leaving with me, and you're going to forget you ever saw either of us. Understand?" The man glared but nodded sullenly. The woman disappeared back into the chicken coop briefly, emerging with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She moved cautiously toward Owen, keeping her eyes on the drunk. "My horse is around front," Owen said, not taking his eyes off the man with the shotgun. "Go to her. She's the chestnut mare tied to the fence post." The woman nodded and moved quickly toward the front of the house. Owen backed away slowly. his revolver still trained on the drunk until he was out of sight. Then he turned and jogged to catch up with the woman, who was standing hesitantly beside his horse. "Can you ride?" he asked, holstering his weapon. "Yes," she said simply. Owen untied his mare and mounted, then extended his hand down to the woman. She hesitated only briefly before taking it, allowing him to pull her up behind him. "Hold on," he instructed as he turned the horse toward the trail. She placed her hands lightly on his waist as they rode away from the Hargrove place at a steady trot. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, putting distance between themselves and the drunk. The woman's grip on Owen's waist gradually tightened as exhaustion began to set in, and he could feel her leaning against his back. "There's a creek up ahead," he said over his shoulder. "We'll stop there so you can rest and clean up." She didn't respond, but he felt her nod against his back. True to his word, Owen guided his mare to a small creek bordered by cottonwood trees. He dismounted and helped the woman down, noting how she winced when her feet touched the ground. "Are you hurt?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Just sore," she replied, straightening her tattered dress as best she could. "Thank you for helping me." Owen nodded, suddenly aware of how little he knew about the woman he'd just rescued. "I'm Owen McAllister. I work at the Rockingham Ranch about 10 miles east of here." "Katherine," she offered after a moment's hesitation. "Katherine Donovan." "Well, Miss Donovan, there's fresh water in the creek if you'd like to wash up." "I'll see what food I have in my saddlebags." Katherine nodded gratefully and made her way to the creek, moving stiffly. Owen busied himself with his saddlebags, giving her privacy while still keeping her in his peripheral vision. He extracted some jerky, hardtack, and a canteen of water, setting them on a fallen log before tending to his horse. When Katherine returned, her face and hands were clean, and she'd made an attempt to smooth her tangled hair. Without the layer of dirt, Owen could see that her skin was fair, with a sprinkling of freckles across her nose and cheeks. She was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps 20 or 21. "Please eat," he said, gesturing to the food he'd laid out. Katherine sat on the log and reached for the jerky with hands that trembled slightly. "I haven't eaten much in days," she admitted, taking a small bite. Owen sat a respectful distance away, watching as she forced herself to eat slowly despite her obvious hunger. "If you don't mind my asking, what were you doing at the Hargrove place?" Katherine chewed thoughtfully before answering. "I was traveling to Helena. My uncle lives there. He's a blacksmith. I was on the stagecoach, but there was trouble with the wheels. The driver said it would take a day to fix, so I decided to walk to the next town." She took a sip of water from the canteen. "I got lost. When I saw the farmhouse, I thought someone might help me with directions. That man, he offered me food, but then—" She trailed off, her green eyes clouding with the memory. "You don't need to tell me more if you don't want to," Owen said gently. "He tried to. He wanted." Katherine's voice faltered. "When I refused him, he got angry, said I was ungrateful. That's when he locked me in that chicken coop, said he'd let me out when I learned some manners." Her jaw tightened. "I would have died in there before giving him what he wanted." Owen's hand unconsciously moved to his revolver. "I should have done more than just threaten him." "You did enough," Katherine said, looking at him directly for the first time. "You saved me." Owen nodded, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "How far is your uncle's place in Helena?" 3 days by stagecoach, I think. I've never been there before. My parents died last winter influenza. Uncle Patrick is my only living relative. He sent me money for the stagecoach ticket." Owen considered their options. The Rocking M was in the opposite direction from Helena, and he was expected back by nightfall. But he couldn't in good conscience leave Katherine to fend for herself. "The next town is Rolling Creek, about 4 hours' ride from here," he said finally. "We can get you a proper meal there, maybe some new clothes, and find out when the next stagecoach to Helena is due." Relief washed over Katherine's face. "I can't thank you enough, Mr. McAllister." "Owen," he corrected, "and there's no need for thanks. Any decent man would have done the same." Katherine gave him a wry smile that transformed her face, making her look younger and livelier despite her ordeal. "I've met enough men to know that's not true, but I appreciate the sentiment." They finished their modest meal in companionable silence as Katherine ate the last of the hardtack. Owen noticed dark bruises on her wrists where the sleeves of her dress had slid back. "Did he hurt you?" he asked, nodding toward the bruises. Katherine quickly pulled her sleeves down. "It's nothing. He was rough when he put me in that coop. I'll heal." Owen's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more about it. "We should get moving if we want to reach Rolling Creek before dark." He helped Katherine onto his mare again, noting how she seemed steadier now that she had food in her stomach. As they rode toward Rolling Creek, Katherine gradually began to talk more, telling Owen about her life in St. Louis, where she'd worked as a seamstress after her parents died, saving every penny to join her uncle in Montana. "What about you?" she asked, as they crested a hill that offered a view of the rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains. "Have you always been a cowboy?" Owen chuckled. "No, madam. Grew up on a farm in Missouri. Came west when I was 20, looking for something different. Been riding with various outfits since then." "Do you like it? The cowboy life?" Owen considered her question seriously. "Most days. It's honest work, being outdoors. Freedom to move on when the mood strikes. Though I've been thinking lately it might be time to put down some roots." "Why's that?" "A man gets tired of sleeping under the stars every night," Owen said with a shrug. "Might be nice to have a place of my own someday. A few head of cattle, maybe some horses." "That sounds lovely," Katherine said softly. They rode in silence for a while. The rhythmic clop of the horses' hooves and the occasional call of a meadowlark the only sounds. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon when they finally spotted the small settlement of Rolling Creek in the distance. "Not much to look at," Owen admitted as they approached the cluster of wooden buildings that made up the town. "But they've got a decent hotel and a general store." Rolling Creek consisted of one main street lined with the essential businesses of frontier life: a general store, a small hotel, a saloon, a livery stable, and a few other establishments. A handful of houses and cabins were scattered around the perimeter. It wasn't much, but to Katherine, it looked like salvation. Owen guided his mare to the hitching post in front of the hotel. He dismounted first, then helped Katherine down, conscious of how her hands lingered on his shoulders for support. Up close, he could see the fatigue etched on her face. "Let's get you a room," he said, leading the way into the hotel. The hotel lobby was small but clean, with a polished wooden counter and a few chairs for guests. A middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair looked up from her ledger as they entered. "Mr. McAllister," she greeted him with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Mrs. Landry," Owen touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "I need a room for the lady." Mrs. Landry's eyes moved to Katherine, taking in her bedraggled appearance with a raised eyebrow. "I see." "Miss Donovan was robbed on her way to Helena," Owen explained smoothly, not wanting to embarrass Katherine with the truth. "Lost her luggage and had some trouble on the trail. I found her walking and offered assistance." Mrs. Landry's expression softened slightly. "Of course. We have a room available, miss. It's small, but clean." "Thank you," Katherine said, her voice stronger than Owen expected. "I would also appreciate information about the next stagecoach to Helena." "That would be the day after tomorrow," Mrs. Landry replied, reaching for a key from the rack behind her. "Stage comes through here every Tuesday and Friday." Owen reached for his wallet. "How much for 2 nights?" "I can't let you do that," Katherine protested. "You've done enough already." "Nonsense," Owen said firmly. "You can pay me back when you reach your uncle's place if it bothers you that much." Katherine looked like she wanted to argue further, but was too exhausted to do so. She nodded reluctantly. Mrs. Landry named a price, which Owen paid without hesitation. "Room 3, top of the stairs," she said, handing Katherine the key. "There's a bathtub in the back room. I can have hot water brought up if you'd like to wash properly." "That would be wonderful," Katherine said gratefully. "And perhaps," Owen added, "you could direct Miss Donovan to wherever she might purchase some new clothes. The general store, maybe." "Millie Parker does some dressmaking," Mrs. Landry replied. "Her shop's just down the street, but she'll be closed now. Opens at 8 tomorrow morning." Owen nodded. "I'll see about getting Miss Donovan there tomorrow, then." He turned to Katherine. "If you'll be all right here, I need to send a message to the ranch letting them know I'll be delayed." "Of course," Katherine said. "Thank you again, Mr. McAllister Owen. I don't know what I would have done without your help today." Owen felt heat rise to his face under her sincere gaze. "Just doing what's right, madam. I'll check back on you later. Make sure you've got everything you need." With a tip of his hat to both women, Owen stepped back out into the late afternoon sunlight. He led his mare to the livery stable, arranged for her care, and then made his way to the telegraph office. After sending a brief message to his employer, explaining his delay, he headed for the saloon. Not for a drink, though, he could certainly use one, but because it was the best place to get information in a small town like Rolling Creek. The saloon was relatively quiet at this hour, with only a few patrons scattered at the tables. Owen nodded to the barkeeper, a burly man with an impressive mustache. "Beer," Owen requested, placing a coin on the counter. As the barkeeper poured his drink, Owen asked casually, "Heard anything about trouble at the old Hargrove place? Found a man there today claiming he was watching it for new owners." The barkeeper snorted. "That'd be Silas Kerr, I reckon. No good drunk. Been squatting there since the Hargroves left. Sheriff's run him off twice, but he keeps coming back." "Sheriff around?" Owen asked, taking a sip of his beer. "Nope. Went to Billings with a prisoner. Won't be back till next week." The barkeeper leaned forward. "Kerr caused some trouble?" Owen considered how much to share. "Let's just say he wasn't being hospitable to travelers." The barkeeper nodded knowingly. "That sounds like Kerr. Man's got a mean streak, especially when he's drinking, which is most of the time." He wiped the counter absently. "You staying in town?" "Till the Friday stage," Owen replied, "helping a lady who had some trouble on the trail get to Helena." "That'd be the young woman you brought to the hotel?" When Owen's expression hardened, the barkeeper raised his hands. "Small town, Mr. McAllister. Word travels fast." Owen finished his beer in silence, paid, and left the saloon. He crossed the street to the general store, which was just about to close for the day. "Evening," the shopkeeper greeted him. "Looking for something specific?" "Yes, sir," Owen replied. "Need some provisions for a lady who lost her belongings. Basic necessities to tide her over until she can buy proper replacements tomorrow." The shopkeeper nodded and helped Owen select a hairbrush, soap, a nightgown, and a few other essential items. Owen paid for the purchases, had them wrapped in brown paper, and headed back to the hotel. Mrs. Landry was still at the front desk when he returned. "Miss Donovan is having her bath," she informed him. "I can make sure she gets these things." "Much obliged," Owen said, handing over the package. "Also, I'd like to arrange for dinner to be brought to her room. What's the best option in town?" "My sister runs the cafe next door," Mrs. Landry replied. "I can have her send over a tray, roast beef tonight with potatoes and greens." "That sounds perfect. For two, please." At Mrs. Landry's raised eyebrow, Owen clarified, "I'll eat in the lobby or on the porch. Just want to make sure Miss Donovan has everything she needs and hear her plans for tomorrow." Mrs. Landry nodded, seemingly satisfied with his explanation. "I'll arrange it. Should be ready in about an hour." Owen thanked her and stepped back outside. He sat on one of the chairs on the hotel's porch, watching as the town settled into evening routines. Lamplight began to glow in windows, and the distant sound of a piano drifted from the saloon. He found himself thinking about Katherine, her courage despite her ordeal, the quiet dignity she maintained even in her tattered dress. There was something about her that intrigued him, beyond just the circumstances of their meeting. An hour later, Owen returned to the hotel lobby, just as Mrs. Landry's sister arrived with 2 covered trays of food. The smell of roast beef made his stomach growl appreciatively. "I'll take those up," he offered, reaching for the trays. "Room 3, Mrs. Landry reminded him, giving him a look that clearly communicated her expectations about propriety. Owen climbed the stairs carefully, balancing the trays. When he reached room 3, he shifted the trays to one arm and knocked gently. "Miss Donovan, it's Owen McAllister. I've brought dinner." The door opened after a moment, revealing a transformed Katherine. Her hair was clean and combed, falling in damp waves around her shoulders. She wore the nightgown Owen had purchased, with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders for modesty. Her face, now clean of all dirt and grime, was even more beautiful than Owen had realized, despite the lingering fatigue in her eyes. "Mr. McAllister," she said, stepping back to allow him entry. "You didn't need to bring dinner." "Figured you wouldn't want to come downstairs," Owen replied, carrying the trays to the small table by the window. "And you need to eat properly after what you've been through." The room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, the table and 2 chairs, and a dresser with a mirror. A oil lamp cast a warm glow over everything. Owen set the trays down and uncovered them, revealing generous portions of roast beef, potatoes, and green beans, along with slices of bread and apple pie for dessert. "This looks wonderful," Katherine said, taking a seat at the table. "Will you join me?" Owen hesitated, aware of the impropriety of dining alone with a young woman in her hotel room. But the genuine invitation in Katherine's eyes and his own hunger won out. "Thank you," he said, taking the other chair. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, both hungrier than they'd realized. Owen watched surreptitiously as Katherine savored each bite, clearly appreciating the simple but hearty meal after days of near starvation. "I spoke with the telegraph operator," Owen said eventually. "The stagecoach to Helena leaves at noon on Friday. That gives you tomorrow to rest and get whatever supplies you need for the journey." Katherine nodded, taking a sip of water. "I still have some money my uncle sent, though not much after paying for the original stagecoach ticket. Enough for new clothes and the fare to Helena, I hope." "If you're short, I can help," Owen offered. "Consider it a loan until you reach your uncle." "You're very kind," Katherine said, meeting his eyes across the table. "Most men wouldn't have stopped to help a stranger, let alone gone to all this trouble afterward." Owen shrugged, uncomfortable with her praise. "Just doing what my pa would have expected of me, that's all." "Tell me about your family," Katherine requested, breaking off a piece of bread. "Are they still in Missouri?" "Pa died 4 years back," Owen replied, his voice softening with the memory. "Ma lives with my sister and her husband now, on their farm near Springfield. I have 2 brothers as well. One's a farrier in Kansas City. The other went to California during the gold rush and stayed on as a rancher." "Do you visit them?" Owen shook his head. "Not in a few years. Send money when I can, letters now and then. Ma writes regularly, keeps me updated on everyone." "You must miss them," Katherine observed. "Sometimes," Owen admitted. "What about your family? You mentioned your parents passed recently." Katherine's expression grew somber. "Yes. Last winter. It was a bad outbreak of influenza in St. Louis. Took both of them within days of each other." She set down her fork, her appetite momentarily diminished by the memory. "We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. My father was a bookkeeper for a shipping company. After they died, I took work as a seamstress to support myself while settling their affairs." "And your uncle in Helena is your only remaining family?" "Yes, my mother's brother. They weren't close. He came west 20 years ago and rarely wrote. But when he heard about my parents, he sent a letter offering me a home with him. Said Helena is growing fast, and a skilled seamstress could do well there." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "Helena's booming, from what I hear. A lot of opportunity there." "Have you been?" "Once, a few years back, delivering horses. Nice enough place, though bigger and busier than I prefer." They continued talking as they finished their meal, the conversation flowing easily between them. Owen told Katherine about his life as a cowhand, the different ranches he'd worked, and the beauty of the Montana Territory. Katherine shared stories of her childhood in St. Louis, her work as a seamstress, and her hopes for a new start in Helena. As they finished the apple pie, Owen noticed Katherine stifling a yawn. "I should let you rest," he said, standing and gathering the empty dishes onto one tray. "You've had quite an ordeal." "Thank you for dinner," Katherine said, rising as well. "And for the other things." She gestured to the hairbrush and soap on the dresser. "It was very thoughtful." "It was no trouble," Owen assured her. "I'll come by in the morning. Take you to that dressmaker Mrs. Landry mentioned, around 9, if that suits you." "That would be perfect," Katherine replied, walking him to the door. She hesitated, then placed her hand lightly on his arm. "I don't know how to properly thank you for everything you've done, Owen." The touch of her hand and the sincerity in her eyes made Owen's heart beat a little faster. "No thanks needed, Miss Donovan." "Katherine," she corrected gently. "Please call me Katherine." "Katherine," Owen repeated, tipping his hat. "Sleep well. You're safe now." He carried the trays downstairs, handed them to Mrs. Landry, and stepped out into the cool evening air. As he walked to the small boarding house where he'd taken a room for the night, Owen found himself thinking about Katherine's smile, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, and the gentle strength she'd shown despite her ordeal. He told himself his interest was merely concern for her well-being, but a voice in the back of his mind suggested it might be something more. Owen woke at dawn the next morning, as was his habit. After washing and dressing, he went to the cafe for breakfast, where he encountered Mrs. Landry's sister, Martha, who informed him that Katherine had already been down for breakfast and had returned to her room to rest. Poor girl was exhausted, Martha said as she poured Owen's coffee. But she ate a good breakfast: eggs, bacon, biscuits, some color coming back to her cheeks already. Good to hear, Owen replied, relieved. She went through quite an ordeal. Martha nodded sympathetically. She didn't share details, but I've got eyes. Those bruises on her wrists tell a story. You did a good thing helping her. Owen ate his breakfast quickly, then stopped by the general store to purchase a few items he thought Katherine might need for her stagecoach journey. At 9 o'clock precisely, he knocked on her hotel room door. Katherine opened it promptly, looking much improved from the previous day. She'd managed to clean and mend her dress as best she could, and her hair was neatly braided and pinned up. The dark circles under her eyes had faded somewhat, and there was more color in her cheeks. "Good morning," she greeted him with a smile. "I'm ready whenever you are." They walked together down the main street to Millie Parker's dressmaking shop. The morning was clear and cool, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Rolling Creek was coming to life around them, with shopkeepers opening their doors and townsfolk going about their business. "It's a lovely little town," Katherine observed as they walked. "Reminds me of some of the smaller communities outside St. Louis." "It's growing," Owen replied. "The railroad's supposed to put a spur line through here next year. That'll change things." Millie Parker's shop was a small but tidy establishment, with a display window featuring a fashionable dress on a mannequin. A bell tinkled as Owen opened the door for Katherine. The dressmaker, a plump woman in her 40s with nimble fingers and sharp eyes, looked up from her work. "Good morning. How can I help you folks?" "Miss Donovan needs some clothes," Owen explained. "She lost her belongings while traveling and is continuing to Helena on Friday's stagecoach." Millie's eyes swept over Katherine, taking in her worn dress and the visible bruises on her wrists. Her expression softened with understanding. "Of course, dear. Let's see what we can find for you." For the next hour, Owen sat patiently in a chair by the door, while Katherine and Millie disappeared behind a curtain with various garments. He could hear their muted voices and occasional laughter, and found himself smiling at the sound. It was good to hear Katherine laughing after what she'd been through. Eventually, Katherine emerged wearing a simple but attractive blue calico dress that complemented her eyes and brought out the auburn highlights in her dark hair. The dress fit her well, emphasizing her slender waist and the graceful curve of her shoulders. "What do you think?" she asked, turning in a small circle. Owen found himself momentarily speechless. "It suits you," he managed finally. "You look very nice." Katherine smiled, pleased with his approval. "Millie is a miracle worker. She's altering another dress for me as well, and found a traveling outfit that needed only minor adjustments." Millie appeared from behind the curtain, with several packages wrapped in brown paper. "I've included some undergarments and night clothes as well," she told Katherine. "Everything a lady needs for travel." Owen stood and reached for his wallet. "How much do we owe you, Mrs. Parker?" "I can pay," Katherine protested, but Owen shook his head. "Please, let me do this. You can repay me when you reach your uncle's if it bothers you." After a moment's hesitation, Katherine nodded her agreement. Owen paid Millie, who promised to deliver the remaining altered dress to the hotel that afternoon. As they stepped back onto the street, Katherine carrying one of the packages while Owen handled the rest, she looked up at him with a smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Thank you. I feel human again in clean, proper clothes." "You're welcome," Owen replied, oddly pleased by her happiness. "Are you hungry? We could get some lunch at the cafe." "That sounds wonderful," Katherine agreed. They spent a pleasant hour at the cafe, where Katherine charmed Martha with her genuine appreciation for the simple but delicious food. Several of the townspeople stopped by their table to introduce themselves, curious about the newcomers. Owen noticed how easily Katherine conversed with everyone, her natural warmth drawing people to her, despite her recent ordeal. After lunch, they walked slowly back toward the hotel. Katherine seemed reluctant to return to her room, and Owen was in no hurry to end their time together. "Would you like to walk a bit more?" he suggested. "There's a nice view from the hill behind the church." Katherine readily agreed, and they made their way through town to the small white church that stood on the eastern edge. Behind it, a gentle hill rose, offering a panoramic view of the surrounding countryside. "It's beautiful," Katherine said softly as they reached the top. The vast Montana landscape stretched before them, rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers, distant mountains still capped with snow, and the tiny cluster of buildings that made up Rolling Creek. "This is why I stayed out west," Owen said, gesturing to the view. "Something about this country gets into your blood." "I can see why," Katherine replied. She sat on a flat rock, arranging her skirts neatly. "Tell me more about your ranch. The Rocking M, was it?" Owen sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "It's a good outfit. The owner, Jacob Miller, is fair and treats his men well. I've been with them 3 months now, which is longer than I usually stay in one place." "Why is that? Why do you move around so much?" Owen considered her question seriously. "Never found a place that felt like home, I suppose, or a reason to stay put." "And what would that reason be?" Katherine asked, her eyes on the distant mountains. "The right opportunity, maybe. A piece of land of my own." Owen paused, then added quietly, "The right person to share it with." Katherine turned to look at him, something unreadable in her expression. "I hope you find that someday." "Owen, what about you?" he asked. "What are your plans once you reach Helena?" "Learn my uncle's household, help where I can, find work as a seamstress, perhaps. Beyond that," she shrugged. "I haven't thought much past getting there safely." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching a hawk circle lazily overhead. Eventually, Katherine spoke again, her voice softer. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't come along yesterday, if you hadn't heard that shotgun blast, or if you'd decided to keep riding." Owen's jaw tightened at the thought. "But I did hear it, and I did stop. No sense dwelling on what didn't happen." "You're right, of course." Katherine tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Still, I can't help feeling that it was more than chance. Like we were meant to meet." The idea resonated with Owen more than he cared to admit. He'd never been one for notions of fate or destiny, but there was something about finding Katherine that felt significant, as if the course of his life had shifted in some fundamental way. "Perhaps," he said simply, not trusting himself to say more. They remained on the hilltop until the afternoon began to wane, talking easily about their lives, their hopes, their observations of the world around them. Owen found himself sharing thoughts and feelings he rarely voiced, drawn by Katherine's attentive listening and thoughtful responses. In turn, he learned about her love of books, her skill with a needle, her quiet determination to build a new life for herself, despite the losses she'd suffered. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they reluctantly made their way back to the hotel. Mrs. Landry informed them that Millie Parker had delivered the altered dress as promised, and that dinner would be served in the small dining room at 6 o'clock. "Would you care to join me?" Katherine asked Owen as they stood in the hotel lobby. "For dinner, I mean, as my guest this time." "I'd be honored," Owen replied, surprised and pleased by the invitation. When he returned to the hotel at 6, freshly shaved and wearing his cleanest shirt, Owen found Katherine waiting for him in the lobby. She wore the second dress Millie had altered for her, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. Her hair was arranged more elaborately than before, with soft curls framing her face. "You look lovely," Owen said sincerely. Katherine smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "Thank you. Shall we?" Dinner was a simple affair, chicken and dumplings, fresh bread, and apple cobbler for dessert, but the company made it memorable. They talked easily, their conversation flowing from topic to topic without awkward pauses. Owen found himself laughing more than he had in months, drawn by Katherine's quick wit and insightful observations. As they finished their cobbler, Katherine grew more serious. "I've been thinking about what happens after I reach Helena." "Oh," Owen said, taking a sip of coffee to hide his sudden discomfort with the topic. "Yes, I'm grateful for my uncle's offer, of course, but I want to establish myself independently as quickly as possible. I don't want to be a burden to him." "I'm sure he doesn't see it that way," Owen replied. "Family helps family. Perhaps. Still, I intend to find work as soon as I can. Millie mentioned that Helena has several fine dressmaking establishments. With my experience, I should be able to secure a position." Owen nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest at the thought of Katherine continuing her journey without him. It was foolish, he knew. They'd known each other barely 2 days. Yet the connection between them felt significant, unlike anything he'd experienced before. "I'm sure you'll do well," he said finally. "You strike me as a woman who accomplishes what she sets her mind to." Katherine smiled at that. "I try to be. Life hasn't always made it easy, but I believe in perseverance." After dinner, Owen walked Katherine to the foot of the stairs that led to the hotel's upper floor. They lingered there, both seemingly reluctant to end the evening. "Thank you for dining with me," Katherine said. "I've enjoyed your company more than I can express." "The pleasure was mine," Owen replied truthfully. "Perhaps tomorrow we could take a longer walk, if you're feeling up to it. There's a nice creek about a mile outside town." "I'd like that very much," Katherine said, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, Owen thought about taking her hand, or perhaps even kissing her goodnight. The impulse surprised him with its intensity. Instead, he simply tipped his hat and wished her a good night. "Until tomorrow," Katherine replied softly before ascending the stairs. Owen watched her go, his thoughts in turmoil. In just 2 days, this woman had come to mean something to him, something he wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny. And in another day, she would board the stagecoach to Helena. And he would return to the Rocking M, their paths diverging perhaps never to cross again. The thought sat uneasily with him as he walked back to his boarding house through the quiet streets of Rolling Creek. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Owen rose early, his mind still preoccupied with thoughts of Katherine and the impending end of their time together. After breakfast, he stopped by the general store to purchase supplies for their planned excursion, some bread, cheese, and apples for a simple picnic. When he arrived at the hotel, he found Katherine waiting in the lobby, wearing her new blue dress and a straw bonnet Millie Parker had included with her purchases. She looked refreshed and happy, all traces of her ordeal now replaced by a healthy glow. "Good morning," she greeted him cheerfully. "I've been looking forward to our outing." "As have I," Owen replied honestly. "It's a perfect day for a walk, not too hot, with just enough breeze." They set off at a leisurely pace, heading east out of town along a well-worn trail. Katherine seemed to enjoy the exercise, her steps light and her eyes bright as she took in the scenery. Wildflowers dotted the grasslands on either side of the path, and birds called to one another from the scattered trees. "This country is so different from Missouri," Katherine observed. "More open somehow, like you can see forever." "That's what drew me to it," Owen admitted. "The sense of possibility. Room to breathe." They walked for about an hour talking easily about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, observations about the plants and animals they encountered. Eventually, the trail led them to a small creek lined with cottonwood trees, their leaves shimmering silver green in the breeze. "This is lovely," Katherine said, gazing at the clear water flowing over smooth stones. "So peaceful." Owen spread his coat on the ground beneath one of the larger trees. "I thought we might rest here a while, if you'd like. I brought some food." They sat together in the dappled shade, sharing the simple picnic Owen had packed. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and flavorful, and the apples crisp and sweet. Katherine ate with evident enjoyment, her appreciation for the simple meal and beautiful surroundings obvious in her expression. "I've been thinking," Owen said eventually, watching the play of sunlight on the water, "about what you said yesterday, regarding your plans in Helena." Katherine looked at him questioningly. "Yes?" "Well, I was wondering—" Owen hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "That is, I thought perhaps—" "Yes?" Katherine prompted again, her eyes intent on his face. Owen took a deep breath. "I was wondering if you might consider a different option." "What sort of option?" "You could stay," Owen said simply. "Here in Rolling Creek, I mean, at least for a while." Katherine's eyes widened slightly. "Stay? But my uncle is expecting me in Helena." "You could send him a letter explaining the change of plans. I'm sure he'd understand if you told him you'd found a good situation here." "What sort of situation?" Katherine asked, her voice careful. Owen looked down at his hands, then back up at her face. "Millie Parker mentioned to me yesterday that she's been looking for someone with experience to help in her shop. Business is growing, especially with the railroad coming. She was quite impressed with your mending work on your old dress. She mentioned that to me as well, Katherine admitted. But I assumed it was just a kind gesture, not a serious offer. It was serious, Owen assured her. I spoke with her this morning before coming to meet you. She'd be pleased to have you work with her, with the possibility of partnership if things go well. Said a woman with your skills doesn't come along every day. Katherine looked thoughtful, her fingers absently tracing patterns on her skirt. It's a generous offer, and Rolling Creek seems like a nice town, but I'd need a place to live. And I've already imposed on your kindness too much. Mrs. Landry has a small room above the hotel she sometimes rents to respectable single ladies, Owen said quickly. It's modest but clean and affordable on what Millie would pay you. Katherine studied his face, her expression unreadable. You've given this a lot of thought. Owen felt heat rise to his face. I suppose I have. May I ask why? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Owen looked into her clear green eyes and knew he couldn't offer anything less than honesty. Because I'm not ready to say goodbye to you, he admitted quietly. I know it's foolish we've known each other only 3 days, but there's something about you, Katherine, something I've never encountered before. The thought of you leaving tomorrow and never seeing you again. It doesn't sit right with me. Katherine's expression softened, a hint of color rising in her cheeks. It doesn't sit right with me either, she confessed. I've felt it too, this connection between us. It's unexpected, but undeniable. Hope rose in Owen's chest. Then you'll consider staying? I'll consider it, Katherine agreed. But I need to think carefully. Making decisions in haste often leads to regret, and I've had enough upheaval in my life recently. Owen nodded, understanding her caution. Of course. Take all the time you need. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the gurgling of the creek and the rustling of leaves overhead. Eventually, Katherine spoke again. Tell me about your work at the Rocking M. Is it far from here? About 10 miles east, Owen replied. A good-sized spread with several thousand head of cattle and about 20 cowhands. I'm usually there 5 or 6 days a week, but Mr. Miller gives us Sundays off, and sometimes a day midweek if work allows. So you could visit Rolling Creek regularly? Katherine observed with a small smile. Very regularly, Owen confirmed, returning her smile. Especially if I had a reason to. The implication hung in the air between them, neither needing to state it explicitly. They spent another hour by the creek, talking about possibilities, sharing more of their thoughts and experiences. The ease between them only deepened, reinforcing Owen's certainty that their meeting had been more than mere chance. As the sun began its westward descent, they reluctantly gathered their things and started back toward town, walking side by side. They were close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, sending a pleasant warmth through Owen each time it happened. Whatever you decide, he said as the buildings of Rolling Creek came into view, I want you to know that meeting you has been significant to me. Even if you continue to Helena tomorrow, I'll remember these days. Katherine stopped walking and turned to face him. Owen, she said softly, I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know that finding you, or you finding me, rather has changed something in me. Awakened possibilities I hadn't considered before. Owen's heart raced at her words and the look in her eyes. Acting on impulse, he reached out and took her hand gently in his. Katherine's fingers curled around his, her touch sending a current of emotion through him that was both exhilarating and terrifying in its intensity. They stood that way for a long moment, hands clasped, eyes locked, the unspoken connection between them almost tangible in the warm afternoon air. Then, by mutual unspoken agreement, they continued walking toward town, their hands still joined. When they reached the hotel, Mrs. Landry was at the front desk. Her eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of their clasped hands, but her expression remained neutral. Miss Donovan, she said, there's a letter for you. Came on the mail wagon this afternoon. Katherine released Owen's hand to accept the envelope, her expression curious. Thank you, Mrs. Landry. The return address showed it was from her uncle in Helena. Katherine looked at Owen, then back at the letter. I should read this. Of course, Owen agreed. Would you like some privacy? Katherine hesitated, then shook her head. No, I'd like you to stay, if you don't mind. They sat together in a quiet corner of the lobby as Katherine opened the letter and began to read. Owen watched her face, trying to gauge her reaction to its contents. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern, then to what looked like relief. "My uncle is ill," she said finally, looking up from the pages. "Nothing serious, but he's been advised by his doctor to rest for several weeks. He writes that I should delay my journey until he's better able to receive me properly." Owen wasn't sure whether to be concerned or relieved. "I'm sorry to hear about your uncle's health, but glad it's not serious." Katherine folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. "It seems the decision about tomorrow has been made for me, at least temporarily. I'll need to send a reply, letting him know I'll delay my arrival." "So you'll stay in Rolling Creek?" Owen asked, trying to keep the hope from his voice. Katherine met his eyes steadily. "Yes, I think I will. At least until my uncle is recovered. It would be sensible to accept Millie's offer and earn some money while I wait." Owen couldn't suppress his smile. "I'm sorry for your uncle's illness, but I can't pretend I'm not happy you'll be staying." "Nor can I," Katherine admitted, with a small smile of her own. It seems fate has intervened again. They agreed to meet for dinner again that evening to discuss the practical details of Katherine's extended stay in Rolling Creek. Owen left her at the hotel to compose her reply to her uncle, while he went to speak with Millie Parker about finalizing her offer of employment to Katherine. The dressmaker was delighted when Owen informed her of Katherine's decision to remain in town temporarily. "That girl has the most exquisite stitches I've seen in years," Millie declared enthusiastically. "And a good eye for design, too. We'll get along famously, I'm sure of it." Next, Owen confirmed with Mrs. Landry about the room above the hotel. The landlady was agreeable, though she fixed Owen with a stern look. "Miss Donovan seems a respectable young lady, Mr. McAllister. I trust your interest in her is honorable." "Completely honorable, madam," Owen assured her, his face warming. "I hold Miss Donovan in the highest regard." Mrs. Landry studied him for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "The room will be ready tomorrow, $15 a month, including breakfast and dinner." With these practical matters arranged, Owen returned to his boarding house to clean up before dinner. As he shaved and changed into fresh clothes, he found himself filled with a sense of anticipation and possibility that he hadn't felt in years. Katherine's decision to stay in Rolling Creek, even temporarily, opened the door to exploring the connection between them without the pressure of an imminent farewell. When Owen arrived at the hotel dining room that evening, he found Katherine already seated at a table by the window. She wore the green dress again and had arranged her hair differently, with soft tendrils framing her face. The sight of her made Owen's heart skip a beat. "You look beautiful," he said simply as he took the seat across from her. "Thank you," Katherine replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I spoke with Millie this afternoon. She's offered me a position starting Monday, with fair wages and the possibility of more responsibility as I prove myself." "That's wonderful," Owen said sincerely. "And Mrs. Landry mentioned the room will be ready tomorrow." "Yes, she showed it to me earlier. It's small but quite comfortable, with its own washstand and a lovely view of the mountains." Katherine paused, her expression growing more serious. "Owen, I want to thank you for everything you've done, not just rescuing me from that horrible situation, but for all your kindness since, helping me find work, a place to live. It's more than I could have expected from anyone, let alone a stranger." "I don't feel like a stranger," Owen admitted. "Not anymore." "No," Katherine agreed softly. "Nor do I." Their dinner arrived venison stew with fresh bread momentarily interrupting their conversation. As they ate, they discussed practical matters. When Owen would return to the Rocking M, the day after tomorrow, how often he might visit Rolling Creek, as often as his duties allowed, and Katherine's new position with Millie Parker. "What will you tell your employer about your extended absence?" Katherine asked, breaking off a piece of bread. "The truth," Owen replied simply. "That I helped a lady in distress and wanted to see her safely settled. Mr. Miller is a fair man. He'll understand." As their meal concluded, Owen found himself reluctant to end the evening. "Would you care for a walk?" he suggested. "The night is mild, and the stars are coming out." Katherine readily agreed, and they strolled together through the quiet streets of Rolling Creek. The town was peaceful at this hour, most businesses closed for the night, only the saloon showing much activity. The sky above was clear, with a crescent moon rising and stars beginning to spangle the deepening blue. They walked to the small town square, where a few benches surrounded a modest fountain. Sitting side by side, they gazed up at the star-filled sky. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Katherine said after a comfortable silence. "About our meeting being more than chance." "And?" Owen prompted when she didn't continue. "I believe you're right," she said simply. "When I left St. Louis, I was frightened and alone, with only the vague promise of a new life with an uncle I barely know. I never imagined—" She trailed off, looking down at her hands. "What?" Owen asked gently. Katherine looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I never imagined I would find someone like you, someone who makes me feel safe and understood and—" She hesitated, then continued in a softer voice, "and cherished." Owen's heart swelled at her words. Acting on instinct, he reached out and took her hand, entwining their fingers. "You are cherished, Katherine, more than I know how to express." She squeezed his hand in response, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know it's been only a few days, but I feel as if I've known you much longer. Is that foolish?" "If it is, then we're both fools," Owen replied with a small smile, "because I feel the same way." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotions and possibilities. Owen found himself leaning closer, drawn by an irresistible pull. Katherine's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she tilted her face up toward his, an invitation in her expression that Owen couldn't misinterpret. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss that sent a current of warmth through Owen's entire being. Katherine's hand tightened in his, and he brought his free hand up to cup her cheek, deepening the kiss slightly. It was sweet and innocent, yet filled with promise and unspoken feelings. When they parted, Owen rested his forehead against Katherine's, unwilling to move away completely. "I've wanted to do that since yesterday," he admitted softly. "I'm glad you did," Katherine whispered, her breath warm against his face. They sat together under the stars for a long while, talking quietly, occasionally sharing another gentle kiss. Owen told Katherine about his dreams of someday having his own small ranch, raising horses perhaps, building a life rooted in one place. Katherine shared her hopes of eventually opening her own dressmaking establishment, creating beautiful clothes that made women feel special. As the night grew cooler, Owen reluctantly walked Katherine back to the hotel. At the foot of the stairs, they lingered again, both reluctant to part. "I'll see you tomorrow?" Katherine asked, her hand still in his. "Of course," Owen promised. "We need to get you settled in your new room, and I should speak with Mr. Miller about my return to the ranch." Katherine nodded, her expression growing slightly sad at the reminder of their impending separation. "Will you be able to visit this weekend?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Owen assured her, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "Sleep well, Katherine." "Good night, Owen," she replied softly before ascending the stairs. Owen watched her go, his heart full of emotions he was only beginning to understand. In just a few days, this remarkable woman had changed everything for him. The future, which had always seemed like an undefined horizon, now held concrete possibilities that both excited and terrified him. As he walked back to his boarding house under the star-filled sky, Owen made a silent promise to himself and to Katherine that he would do everything in his power to explore the connection between them, to nurture it and see where it might lead. The next day was filled with preparations for Katherine's move to her new room and Owen's return to the Rocking M Ranch. In the morning, they visited the general store together to purchase a few necessities for Katherine's comfort: a small tea kettle, some candles, writing paper and ink, and other modest items to make her room more homelike. "You don't need to buy these things for me," Katherine protested as Owen paid for the purchases. "I can manage on my own." "I know you can," Owen replied simply, "but it gives me pleasure to help. Please allow me this." Katherine relented, her expression softening. "Thank you. But I insist on repaying you once I receive my first wages from Millie." Owen didn't argue, though he had no intention of accepting her money. The joy of providing for her, even in these small ways, was payment enough. They spent the afternoon helping Katherine move into her new room above the hotel. It was indeed small, but clean and comfortable, with a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a small table with 2 chairs near the window. The view, as Katherine had mentioned, was lovely rolling grasslands leading to distant mountains. "It's perfect," Katherine declared as she arranged her few possessions. "A wonderful place to start this new chapter of my life." Owen watched her from the doorway, struck again by her resilience and optimism despite all she'd been through. "I'm glad you're pleased with it." When everything was arranged to Katherine's satisfaction, they went downstairs for an early dinner. The mood was bittersweet, both aware that Owen would be leaving for the ranch the next morning. "I'll ride into town on Sunday," Owen promised as they lingered over coffee. "Sooner, if I can manage it." "I'll look forward to it," Katherine replied, "and I'll have much to tell you about my first week working with Millie." After dinner, they took another walk through town, eventually finding themselves on the hill behind the church where they'd sat the previous day. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of gold, pink, and purple. They sat close together on the same flat rock, Owen's arm around Katherine's shoulders, her head leaning against him. "I'll miss this," Katherine said softly as the colors began to fade from the sky. "Miss you." "And I you," Owen replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "But it's only for a few days, and knowing you're here, safe and settled, will make the separation easier to bear." Katherine turned her face up to his. "Owen, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything, not just the practical help, but for truly seeing me from the beginning." Owen's heart swelled with emotion. "Katherine," he said seriously, taking both her hands in his, "I need you to understand something. What I feel for you isn't gratitude or obligation or anything like that. It's something I've never felt before, something real and true that I want to explore, if you'll allow it." "I will," Katherine whispered, her eyes shining in the fading light. "Because I feel it too." Their kiss this time was deeper, more assured, a promise of feelings that were growing stronger with each passing hour. When they finally parted, both were breathless, their hearts racing. "We should head back," Owen said reluctantly as darkness began to settle around them. "It's getting late." They walked hand in hand back to the hotel, speaking little but communicating much through glances and touches. At the door to the hotel, Owen kissed Katherine once more, gently but with feeling. "I'll come say goodbye before I leave in the morning," he promised. "Around 7, if that's not too early." "I'll be waiting," Katherine assured him. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Owen rose early, packed his few belongings, and settled his bill at the boarding house. His heart was heavy with the thought of leaving Katherine, even for a few days, but he knew his duty to his employer couldn't be postponed any longer. Katherine was waiting for him in the hotel lobby when he arrived, looking lovely in her blue dress despite the early hour. Mrs. Landry was nowhere to be seen, giving them a moment of privacy. "Good morning," Katherine greeted him with a brave smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning," Owen replied, taking her hands in his. "Ready for your first day with Millie?" "Yes, though it won't be the same without you nearby." Katherine squeezed his hands. "But I understand you need to return to your responsibilities, and it's only for a few days." "I'll be back before you know it," Owen promised. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I have something for you, a small token to remember me by until Sunday." Katherine accepted the package with surprise. "Owen, you didn't need to—" "I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Open it." Katherine carefully unwrapped the tissue paper to reveal a small silver brooch in the shape of a flower. It was simple, but beautifully crafted, with delicate petals surrounding a central pearl. "It's lovely," Katherine breathed, running a finger over the brooch. "But when did you—" "Yesterday, while you were with Millie discussing your duties," Owen explained. "I saw it in the jeweler's window and thought of you." "It's perfect," Katherine said, her eyes misting slightly. "Will you pin it on for me?" Owen took the brooch and carefully pinned it to the collar of her dress, his fingers brushing against her neck in a touch that sent warmth through both of them. "There," he said, stepping back to admire it. "Beautiful, like its wearer." Katherine's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Thank you, Owen. I'll treasure it." The clock in the lobby chimed 7, reminding them that Owen needed to be on his way. He sighed reluctantly. "I should go. Mr. Miller will be expecting me." "Of course," Katherine nodded, trying to keep her expression brave. "Be safe on the trail, and remember your promise to return on Sunday." Wild horses, Owen reminded her with a smile. He leaned down and kissed her gently, not caring if Mrs. Landry or anyone else might see. Until Sunday, Katherine. Until Sunday, she echoed softly. With a final squeeze of her hands, Owen turned and walked out of the hotel. His heart both heavy with the parting and light with the knowledge that he would see her again soon. He mounted his mare, who was well rested after several days in the livery stable, and set off for the Rockingham ranch, already counting the hours until he could return to Rolling Creek and to Katherine. The 10-mile ride to the Rockingham passed quickly, Owen's thoughts occupied with memories of Katherine, her smile, her laugh, the feel of her hand in his, the softness of her lips against his own. He knew his feelings were developing at an unprecedented rate, but there was nothing hasty or ill-considered about them. Each moment with Katherine had only confirmed his initial impression of her character, her strength, her kindness, her intelligence, and her grace. When he arrived at the ranch, the foreman, Bill Hawkins, greeted him with a knowing smile. There he is, the hero who rescued a damsel in distress. Word travels fast in these parts, McAllister. Owen dismounted, shaking his head ruefully. Should have known news would beat me here. Mr. Miller wants to see you, Hawkins added, jerking his thumb toward the main house. Said to send you over as soon as you arrived. Owen handed his mare over to a stable boy and made his way to the sprawling ranch house that served as the headquarters for the Rockingham operation. Jacob Miller was a fair employer who treated his men well, demanding hard work but rewarding it appropriately. Owen respected him greatly and hoped his extended absence hadn't caused too much inconvenience. Miller was in his office when Owen knocked on the open door. The rancher looked up from his ledger, his weathered face breaking into a smile. McAllister, come in, come in. Glad to see you back in one piece. Thank you, sir, Owen replied, taking the offered seat across from Miller's desk. I apologize for the extended absence. There were complications. Miller leaned back in his chair, regarding Owen with interest. So I've heard. Something about rescuing a young lady from a chicken coop? Sounds like there's a story there. Owen found himself relating the tale of finding Katherine imprisoned by Silas Kerr, her ordeal, and his decision to help her get established in Rolling Creek. He was careful to keep the account factual and professional, making no mention of the personal feelings that had developed between them. Miller listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When Owen finished, the rancher studied him for a long moment before speaking. Sounds like you did the right thing, McAllister. Can't abide a man who'd mistreat a woman that way. This Kerr fellow ought to be behind bars. Yes, sir, Owen agreed. Unfortunately, the sheriff won't be back in Rolling Creek until next week. Well, you did what you could, Miller said approvingly. And the young lady is settled now, safe? Yes, sir. She's taken a position with the local dressmaker and found lodging above the hotel. Owen hesitated, then added, I promised I'd ride back on Sunday to check on her, if that's all right with you. A knowing look crossed Miller's face. I see. This Miss Donovan, she means something to you, does she? Owen felt heat rise to his face, but met his employer's gaze directly. Yes, sir, she does. I know it's been only a few days. But there's something special about her. Something I'd like to explore further, if you've no objection to me riding into town on my day off. Miller chuckled. No objection at all, McAllister. A man's personal life is his own business, as long as it doesn't interfere with his work. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Though I will say this, when a good woman comes along, a wise man doesn't let her slip away. My Eliza and I knew each other just 2 weeks before I proposed. Been happily married 32 years now. Owen nodded, taking the advice in the spirit it was offered. I'll keep that in mind, sir. See that you do, Miller replied with a wink. Now, we've got a herd of 2-year-olds that need branding in the north pasture. Think you're up to getting back to work this afternoon? Yes, sir, Owen said firmly. I'm ready. The next 3 days passed in a blur of hard physical labor that left Owen exhausted but satisfied. The rhythm of ranch work was familiar and grounding, yet he found his thoughts constantly straying to Katherine. Each night, he fell asleep wondering what she was doing, how she was adjusting to her new position with Millie, whether she was thinking of him as often as he thought of her. On Saturday evening, as the hands gathered in the bunkhouse after a long day's work, Owen found himself the target of good-natured teasing from his fellow cowboys. "So, McAllister," drawled Tom Jensen, a lanky Texan who'd been with the Rocking M for several years. "Heard you found yourself a pretty lady in Rolling Creek. That why you're all spruced up for a Saturday night at the ranch?" Owen glanced down at himself, surprised. He'd shaved and put on a clean shirt after washing up, but hadn't thought it particularly noteworthy. "Just trying to maintain some standards," he replied with a shrug. "Uh-huh," Jensen said skeptically, exchanging knowing looks with the other men. "And I suppose you'll be heading to town first thing tomorrow for church services, being the God-fearing man you are?" The other hands chuckled, and Owen couldn't help but smile. "As a matter of fact, I will be attending services. Miss Donovan mentioned she'd be there." This admission prompted a chorus of whoops and hollers from the men. Owen took the ribbing in good humor, knowing it came from a place of camaraderie rather than malice. These men were the closest thing to family he had in Montana, and their interest, however boisterous, was a form of support. Later, as the bunkhouse quieted for the night, Jensen approached Owen's bunk. "Didn't mean to give you a hard time earlier," he said in a low voice. "Truth is, I'm happy for you. Finding a good woman out here ain't easy." "Thanks, Tom," Owen replied sincerely. "Though it's early days yet, I don't want to rush things." Jensen nodded thoughtfully. "Smart thinking. But don't wait too long either. Good women are scarce in these parts. If she's special, make sure she knows it." Owen took those words to heart as he drifted off to sleep, his last thoughts before slumber being of Katherine's smile and the promise of seeing her the next day. Sunday dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect early summer day that made the Montana Territory feel like paradise. Owen was up before the sun, eager to make the ride to Rolling Creek. He saddled his mare, secured a small package in his saddlebag, a gift for Katherine he had asked one of the hands to pick up in Billings earlier in the week, and set off just as the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern horizon. The ride seemed shorter this time, his anticipation making the miles fly by. As he approached Rolling Creek, Owen felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded him of his younger days. At 28, he'd thought himself past such youthful emotions, but Katherine had awakened something in him he'd thought long dormant. The church bells were ringing as Owen rode into town, calling the faithful to the morning service. He stabled his mare at the livery, brushed the dust from his clothes, and made his way to the small white church on the eastern edge of town. The service was already underway when Owen slipped quietly through the door. His eyes immediately sought Katherine among the congregation, finding her seated about halfway up the aisle on the right side. She wore her green dress with the silver brooch he'd given her, pinned at the collar, and her hair was arranged neatly beneath a modest hat. She was so focused on the minister's words that she didn't notice Owen's arrival. Owen took a seat in the back row, content for the moment just to watch Katherine. There was something about seeing her in this setting, peaceful, attentive, part of the community, that made his heart swell with emotion. She belonged here, he realized. Not just in Rolling Creek, but in his life. When the service ended and the congregation began to file out, Owen made his way toward Katherine. She was speaking with an older couple, smiling at something the woman said. Then she looked up and saw him, and her entire face transformed with joy. "Owen!" she exclaimed, excusing herself from the couple and moving quickly to meet him. "You came." "I promised I would," he replied, taking her hands in his and resisting the urge to kiss her right there in the churchyard. "You look lovely." Katherine's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Thank you, and thank you for the brooch. I've received so many compliments on it." "It suits you," Owen said sincerely. "How has your week been? Are you settling in all right?" "Wonderfully," Katherine replied, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Millie is a joy to work with, and the townspeople have been so welcoming. Mrs. Landry has practically adopted me, and the room is becoming quite cozy." She squeezed his hands. "But I've missed you terribly." "And I you," Owen admitted, his voice low. "Every minute." They stood there, hands clasped, gazes locked, until the clearing of a throat nearby reminded them they weren't alone. Turning, Owen found himself facing Reverend Thomas, the kindly minister of Rolling Creek's church. "Good morning, Mr. McAllister," the Reverend greeted him with a knowing smile. "It's good to see you at our service today." "Good morning, Reverend," Owen replied respectfully. "It's good to be here." "Miss Donovan has been telling us how you came to her aid," the minister continued. A fine Christian act, helping a stranger in need. Owen felt uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same, he said, echoing what he'd told Katherine days earlier. I'm not so sure about that, Reverend Thomas replied thoughtfully. But it speaks well of your character, nonetheless. He smiled at them both. I won't keep you any longer. Miss Donovan, we'll see you this evening for the hymn singing. Of course, Reverend, Katherine assured him. I'm looking forward to it. As the minister moved away to greet other parishioners, Owen raised an eyebrow questioningly. Hymn singing? Katherine nodded. Sunday evenings at the church. Mrs. Landry mentioned it, and I thought it would be a nice way to meet more people. Will you stay for it? Owen hadn't planned to remain in Rolling Creek past supper time, but the hopeful look in Katherine's eyes made his decision easy. I'd be honored to accompany you. They spent the day together, first having dinner at the cafe, then walking through town, while Katherine pointed out changes and improvements she'd noticed during the week. She showed him the dressmaking shop where she now worked, proudly displaying a dress bodice she'd been embroidering. Millie says my stitches are the finest she's ever seen, Katherine told him, her voice warm with pride. She's already talking about letting me design a dress for Mrs. Miller, the rancher's wife, when she comes to town next month. That's wonderful, Owen said sincerely, pleased by her obvious happiness. You've made quite an impression in just a few days. As the afternoon waned, they found themselves once again on the hill behind the church, sitting close together on what Owen had come to think of as their rock. The view was as magnificent as ever. The vast Montana landscape stretching out before them in all its rugged beauty. I brought you something, Owen said, reaching into his pocket for the small package he had retrieved from his saddlebag. Just a token? Katherine accepted the package with a surprised smile. Owen, you shouldn't have. The brooch was already too generous. Open it, he encouraged gently. She unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a small leather-bound book of poetry. Oh, Owen, she breathed, running her fingers over the embossed cover. How did you know I love poetry? You mentioned it when we were walking by the creek, Owen replied, pleased by her reaction. Said your father used to read Wordsworth to your mother in the evenings. You remembered that? Katherine looked up at him, her eyes shining. That's so thoughtful. I remember everything you tell me, Owen said simply. Everything about you matters to me, Katherine. The look she gave him then was so full of emotion that Owen couldn't resist leaning in to kiss her. Their lips met softly at first, then with growing intensity as Katherine's arms wound around his neck. Owen pulled her closer, his heart pounding with feelings he could no longer deny or contain. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against Katherine's. I know it's only been a week, he said softly, but I'm falling in love with you, Katherine Donovan. I think I started falling the moment I found you. Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. And I with you, Owen McAllister. It's happened so quickly, but it feels more real than anything I've ever known. They held each other close as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape. In that moment, Owen knew with absolute certainty that his life had changed irrevocably and wonderfully since the day he'd heard that shotgun blast at the abandoned Hargrove property. The evening hymn singing at the church was a simple, joyful affair. The townspeople gathered in the small sanctuary, and Reverend Thomas's wife played the piano while they sang familiar hymns. Owen, who hadn't attended church regularly since leaving Missouri, found himself moved by the community spirit and the sound of Katherine's clear voice beside him. After the singing concluded, several people approached them. Curious about the newcomer who had captured the attention of the quiet cowhand from the Rocking M, Owen was surprised by how easily Katherine had integrated herself into the community in just a week. She knew people's names, asked after their families, and seemed genuinely interested in their lives. It was clear she had already become a valued addition to Rolling Creek. As they walked back to the hotel in the gathering twilight, Owen's arm around Katherine's waist, he found himself thinking about the future in a way he never had before. For years, he'd lived day to day, taking life as it came, never putting down roots or making long-term plans. Now, suddenly, he was imagining a settled life, a home, a family, a place in the community with Katherine by his side. A penny for your thoughts, Katherine said, looking up at him curiously. You've gone quiet." Owen smiled down at her. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a week, how much you've changed me." "For the better, I hope," Katherine replied with a gentle smile. "Definitely for the better," Owen assured her. They had reached the hotel, and he reluctantly removed his arm from her waist as they entered the lobby. Mrs. Landry was at her usual post behind the desk. "Evening, Miss Donovan, Mr. McAllister," she greeted them with a nod. "Pleasant hymns singing tonight." "Very pleasant," Katherine agreed. "Will you join us for tea in the parlor, Mrs. Landry? I'm sure Mr. McAllister would appreciate some refreshment before his ride back to the ranch." The older woman shook her head. "Thank you, dear, but I've got my ledgers to attend to. You two enjoy your tea." She gave Owen a pointed look. "The parlor door stays open, mind you." "Yes, madam," Owen agreed solemnly, fighting a smile at her motherly concern for Katherine's reputation. The hotel's small parlor was empty at this hour, the other guests either retired for the night or still out, enjoying Sunday evening activities. Katherine busied herself preparing tea at the sideboard, while Owen took a seat on the small sofa, watching her with undisguised admiration. "You seem very at home here," he observed as she handed him a cup of tea and sat beside him, maintaining a proper distance that nonetheless felt intimate. "I am," Katherine admitted, her hands cradling her teacup. "More so than I expected to be, honestly. Rolling Creek reminds me of the small town outside St. Louis where we spent summers when I was a child. There's a similar sense of community, of belonging." "And Helena?" Owen asked carefully. "Do you still plan to join your uncle there once he's recovered?" Katherine was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. "I don't know," she said finally, her voice soft. "A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Helena was my destination, my plan for the future. But now—" She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Now, everything's different." Owen set his teacup on the small table beside the sofa and took Katherine's free hand in his. "Katherine, I know it's only been a week. I know we're still getting to know each other, but I want you to know that I've never felt this way about anyone before. What I feel for you is real and true, and I believe it will only grow stronger with time." Katherine set her own teacup aside and turned to face him fully, her hand still in his. "I feel the same way, Owen. It's frightening, in a way, how quickly and completely you've come to matter to me. But it's also the most wonderful feeling I've ever experienced." Owen brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I have to return to the ranch tonight, but I'll be back next Sunday sooner if I can manage it." He hesitated, then added, "And I'd like to write to you, if that's acceptable." "I'd like that very much," Katherine replied, her smile warming him more than the tea had. "And I'll write to you as well, though letters are a poor substitute for your presence." "Agreed," Owen said with a rueful smile. "But they'll help bridge the days until we can be together again." They finished their tea, talking quietly about their plans for the coming week. All too soon. It was time for Owen to depart if he wanted to reach the ranch before it got too late. Katherine walked with him to the livery stable where his mare was waiting, saddled and ready. "Be careful on the ride back," Katherine said, as Owen mounted his horse. "The moon is bright, but still—" "I'll be fine," Owen assured her, touched by her concern. "I've made this ride dozens of times." Katherine nodded, looking up at him with eyes that shone in the moonlight. "Until next Sunday, then." Owen leaned down from the saddle, cupping her cheek with his hand. "Until then," he agreed, kissing her softly. "Sweet dreams, Katherine." "Sweet dreams, Owen," she whispered as he straightened and gathered the reins. With a final tip of his hat, Owen turned his mare toward the trail that would take him back to the rocking M. As he rode away from Rolling Creek, the moonlight illuminating his path, his heart was both heavy with the parting and light with the knowledge that what he and Katherine were building together was something rare and precious, something worth any amount of separation or hardship. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern that, while sometimes frustrating in its limitations, was nonetheless deeply satisfying to both Owen and Katherine. True to his word, Owen rode into Rolling Creek every Sunday, attending church with Katherine, spending the day in her company, and returning to the ranch in the evening. Occasionally, he managed to visit midweek as well, when Mr. Miller sent him to town on ranch business. Their letters to each other, delivered by the weekly mail wagon, became treasured lifelines during the days they were apart. Owen, who had never considered himself a man of words, found himself pouring his heart onto paper in ways that surprised him. Katherine's letters in return were eloquent and heartfelt, each one revealing more of her thoughts, her dreams, and her growing feelings for him. As June gave way to July and July to August, their relationship deepened and strengthened. The people of Rolling Creek came to see them as a couple, and Owen noticed that he was no longer introduced as the cowhand from the Rocking M, but as Miss Donovan's beau. The designation pleased him more than he could express. Katherine thrived in her position at Millie Parker's dressmaking shop. Her skill with a needle and her eye for design quickly made her indispensable, and Millie began giving her more responsibility. By mid-August, Katherine was designing dresses for some of the wealthier women in the area, including Mrs. Miller from the Rocking M, who became one of her most enthusiastic supporters. "Your young lady has quite a talent," Mrs. Miller told Owen one evening when he was dining at the main house, an occasional privilege extended to the more trusted hands. "The dress she designed for me has already drawn admiring comments in Rolling Creek. I've recommended her to several of my friends." "Thank you, madam," Owen replied, warmed by her praise of Katherine. "She's passionate about her work." "And about you, I'd wager," Mrs. Miller added with a knowing smile. "Jacob tells me you've been riding into town every Sunday like clockwork." Owen felt his face warm. "Yes, madam. Miss Donovan and I have become close." "Mrs.?" Both Miller exchanged a glance with her husband. "So, we've gathered. Any plans to make it official?" The directness of the question caught Owen off guard, though he'd been thinking along those lines himself for weeks now. That is, we haven't discussed it formally. It's still relatively early in our acquaintance." "Early, perhaps, but not premature," Mr. Miller observed, joining the conversation. "When you know, you know. Eliza and I were engaged after 2 weeks of courting, married within a month. 32 years later, I've never regretted the haste." "Neither have I," Mrs. Miller agreed, smiling fondly at her husband. "When it's right, why wait?" Why indeed, Owen thought, as he rode back to the bunkhouse that night. He had been contemplating marriage more and more frequently as summer progressed. His feelings for Katherine had only grown stronger with each passing day, each letter, each precious visit. He had no doubts about wanting to spend his life with her. The only question was whether she felt ready for such a commitment, and whether he could provide the kind of life she deserved. That Saturday, as Owen prepared for his weekly visit to Rolling Creek, he made a decision. He approached Mr. Miller in his office, hat in hand, to discuss a matter that had been on his mind for several weeks. "Mr. Miller, I was wondering if you had a few minutes to discuss a business proposition," Owen began, uncharacteristically nervous. The rancher gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Of course, McAllister. Have a seat. What's on your mind?" Owen sat, turning his hat in his hands. "You know I've been seeing Miss Donovan in Rolling Creek for some time now." Miller nodded, a knowing gleam in his eye. "I'm aware." "Well, sir, my intentions toward her are serious. I hope to ask for her hand in marriage, if she'll have me." Owen took a deep breath, then continued. "But to do that properly, I need to be able to offer her a home, a future. I've been saving my wages, but a cowhand's pay only goes so far." "What are you proposing?" Miller asked, leaning forward with interest. "I've had my eye on the old Thompson place, just outside Rolling Creek," Owen explained. "It's been vacant since old man Thompson died last year. His son lives in Oregon and has no interest in keeping it. It's not much 60 acres, a small cabin that needs work, some outbuildings, but the land is good, with a creek running through it. Could support a small herd of cattle, maybe some horses." Miller nodded thoughtfully. "I'm familiar with the property. Solid little spread, though it needs someone willing to put in the work." He studied Owen for a moment. "And you're looking to buy it?" "Yes, sir. I've spoken with the bank in Rolling Creek. They're willing to loan me part of the purchase price, based on my reputation and employment history. But I'm still short by about $800. "And you're hoping I might loan you the difference?" Miller asked, his expression unreadable. Owen nodded, meeting his employer's gaze directly. "Yes, sir. I'd continue working here while I get the place in order, paying you back from my wages. Once it's ready, I'd cut back to part-time with the Rocking M, focusing on building my own operation." Eventually, I hope to breed horses quality stock that would benefit ranches like yours. Miller leaned back in his chair, considering Owen's proposal. You've given this a lot of thought. Yes, sir. My future with Katherine means everything to me. I want to do this right. For a long moment, Miller was silent, tapping his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. Then he smiled. I have a counter-proposal for you, McAllister. Sir, Owen said, uncertain. I've been impressed with your work these past few years, your dedication, your skill with horses, your integrity. I've also noticed you have a good head for business, better than most cowhands. Miller leaned forward again. What would you say to becoming the Rockingham's horse manager? Full responsibility for our breeding program, training, purchases, and sales. The position comes with a substantial raise and the use of the old foreman's cabin on the east side of the property, about 5 miles from Rolling Creek. Owen was stunned by the offer. The position Miller described was a significant step up from his current role, with far more responsibility and better compensation. And the cabin, a comfortable 2-room structure he'd admired from afar, would make a suitable first home for a married couple. That's an extremely generous offer, Mr. Miller, Owen said when he found his voice. But what about the Thompson place? Miller waved a hand dismissively. Let it go. What I'm offering is a better opportunity for a young man looking to build a future. The salary would allow you to save faster toward your own place eventually. And the cabin would give you and Miss Donovan a proper home in the meantime. He smiled knowingly. And 5 miles is a much easier commute to town than 10, especially for a man eager to see his wife at the end of the day. Owen considered the proposal carefully. It wasn't exactly what he'd planned, but Miller was right. It was a better opportunity, both financially and practically, and the thought of having a proper home to offer Katherine, rather than asking her to live in a half-renovated cabin while he worked 2 jobs, was undeniably appealing. I accept, Owen said finally, extending his hand across the desk. And I'm deeply grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Miller. The rancher shook his hand firmly. Good man. The position and cabin are yours starting next month. That should give you time to get the place ready for a bride, assuming she accepts your proposal. Yes, sir, Owen agreed, his mind already racing with plans and possibilities. Thank you. Thank me by making our horse program the best in the territory, Miller replied with a grin, and by being happy. Eliza's taken quite a shine to your Miss Donovan. She'll be pleased to have her as a neighbor. As Owen rode toward Rolling Creek the next morning, his heart was lighter than it had been in years. The promotion, the cabin, the future stretching out before him with Katherine by his side, it all seemed almost too good to be true. Yet it was happening, and he could hardly contain his excitement at the prospect of sharing the news with Katherine. He found her after church as usual, and the radiant smile she gave him when their eyes met across the churchyard made his heart skip a beat. 3 months into their courtship, and still the sight of her affected him like the first day. You're in high spirits this morning, Katherine observed as they walked arm in arm toward the cafe for their usual Sunday dinner. Something good happen at the ranch? Owen smiled down at her, squeezing her hand where it rested in the crook of his arm. As a matter of fact, yes, but I'll tell you about it later, when we have more privacy. Katherine looked intrigued, but didn't press for details. They enjoyed their dinner at the cafe, where Martha greeted them like family and served their usual favorites without needing to ask. Afterward, they took their customary walk, eventually finding themselves on their hilltop behind the church. The day was warm but pleasant, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed grass. As they sat on their rock, looking out over the landscape that had become so dear to them both, Owen knew the moment had come. Katherine, he began, taking both her hands in his, these past 3 months have been the happiest of my life. Finding you, or rather, you finding me, has changed everything for me. Katherine's eyes softened with emotion. For me as well, Owen. I can't imagine my life without you in it now. I hope you never have to, Owen said earnestly. Katherine, I've been offered a promotion at the Rockingham horse manager, with full responsibility for the breeding program and all related operations. It comes with a significant increase in salary and, he paused, his heart racing. And the use of the old foreman's cabin on the east side of the property, just 5 miles from Rolling Creek. Owen, that's wonderful, Katherine exclaimed, squeezing his hands. What an opportunity. It is, Owen agreed, but it's only wonderful if I can share it with you. Taking a deep breath, he slid off the rock and onto one knee before her, still holding her hands. Katherine Donovan, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Katherine's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Owen McAllister, I will marry you. With all my heart, yes. Owen rose to his feet, pulling Katherine up with him and into his arms. Their kiss was tender yet passionate, filled with all the love and promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both were breathless and smiling. I don't have a ring yet, Owen admitted apologetically. I wanted to ask you first, then we can choose one together in Billings when we go to register our intent to marry. I don't need a ring to know I'm yours, Katherine assured him, her eyes shining with happiness. But when should we marry, and where? I should write to my uncle in Helena. I was thinking October would be nice, Owen suggested. That gives us time to prepare the cabin, and for you to make whatever arrangements you need with Millie. As for where, I assume to hear in Rolling Creek, with Reverend Thomas officiating, if that suits you. It suits me perfectly, Katherine agreed. Rolling Creek is home now, our home. It's where our story truly began. They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing their plans, the improvements Owen wanted to make to the cabin before Katherine moved in, the simple wedding they both desired, the life they would build together. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Owen held Katherine close, overwhelmed with gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought them together. Do you ever think about that day at the Hargrove place? He asked softly, his chin resting on the top of her head. How different our lives might have been if I hadn't heard that shotgun blast, or if I'd decided to keep riding. Katherine was quiet for a moment, then said, I believe we would have found each other somehow, some way. Call it fate or divine intervention or just blind luck. But I think we were meant to be together, Owen McAllister. I believe you're right, Owen agreed, turning her in his arms to face him. And I promise you this, Katherine Donovan, soon to be McAllister, you will never again know hunger or fear or imprisonment of any kind. You will eat at my table, sleep in my bed, and live in my heart for all the days of my life. And you in mine, Katherine whispered, sealing their promise with a kiss as the last rays of sunlight gilded the Montana landscape around them, bearing witness to a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances but would endure for a lifetime. The wedding of Owen McAllister and Katherine Donovan took place on a crisp October morning in the little white church of Rolling Creek. The building was filled to capacity with well-wishers, the entire Rockingham Ranch contingent, the townspeople who had embraced Katherine as one of their own, and even Katherine's Uncle Patrick, who had recovered from his illness and traveled from Helena for the occasion. Katherine wore a dress of her own design, and making a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk with delicate embroidery that showcased her considerable talents. Owen, standing at the altar in a new suit purchased for the occasion, thought she had never looked more beautiful as she walked down the aisle on her uncle's arm, her eyes fixed on his, her smile radiant with happiness. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with Reverend Thomas speaking eloquently about the sacred bond of marriage and the journey the young couple was beginning together. When Owen and Katherine exchanged their vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. I, Owen James McAllister, take you, Katherine Elizabeth Donovan, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Owen said, his voice steady despite the emotion welling in his chest. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. Katherine's voice was clear and sure as she repeated the same vows, her hands warm in Owen's, her eyes never leaving his face. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, and Owen kissed his bride for the first time as her husband, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued at the Rockingham Ranch, where the Millers had insisted on hosting the wedding dinner. Tables were set up in the spacious yard, decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons. A fiddler played lively tunes, and there was dancing and laughter long into the evening. As the sun began to set, Owen took Katherine's hand and led her away from the festivities, toward the path that led to their new home. The old foreman's cabin had been transformed over the past 2 months into a cozy, welcoming dwelling. Owen had repaired the roof, replaced broken windows, built new furniture, and painted everything to Katherine's specifications. Katherine had sewn curtains, cushions, and quilts, turning the simple structure into a home with her skilled hands and loving attention to detail. "Are you ready to see our home, Mrs. McAllister?" Owen asked, savoring the new name on his lips. "More than ready, Mr. McAllister," Katherine replied with a smile that made his heart race. Owen swept her into his arms, making her laugh with surprise and delight. "Threshold," he explained with a grin, carrying her up the short path to their cabin. He pushed open the door with his foot and carried her inside, setting her down gently in the center of the main room. Katherine looked around with shining eyes, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings, the polished wood floor covered with a colorful rag rug, the cheerful fire burning in the stone fireplace. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to face Owen. "Our home." "Our home," Owen agreed, drawing her into his arms. "And you, Mrs. McAllister, will always eat at my table, sleep in my bed, and live in my heart." "Always," Katherine promised, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As twilight deepened into night outside their windows, Owen and Katherine began their life together in the home they had prepared with their own hands, a symbol of the future they would build together, one day at a time, with love as their foundation and guidance. 5 years later, Owen stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Katherine chased their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, through the garden. Their son, James, just 1 year old, was perched securely on Owen's hip, babbling happily as he observed his mother and sister's game. The years had been good to them. Owen's position as horse manager at the Rocking M had flourished, his breeding program gaining a reputation throughout the territory for quality stock. Katherine had continued working with Millie Parker until Emma's birth, when she decided to focus on motherhood while taking on select dressmaking projects from home. Their little homestead had grown along with their family. With Mr. Miller's blessing and support, Owen had purchased 20 acres surrounding the cabin, where he now kept his own small herd of horses, the beginning of the breeding operation he hoped to expand in the coming years. The cabin itself had been enlarged, with Owen adding a proper bedroom for Emma and a small workspace for Katherine's sewing. Life wasn't always easy in the Montana territory. There were harsh winters, dry summers, financial challenges, and the usual hardships of frontier life. But together, Owen and Katherine faced each obstacle with the same strength and determination that had characterized their relationship from the beginning. As Owen watched his wife and daughter playing in the golden light of the late afternoon sun, he was overwhelmed with gratitude for the twist of fate that had led him to that abandoned homestead 5 years earlier. The sound of a shotgun blast, terrifying in the moment, had ultimately led him to the greatest happiness he'd ever known. Katherine looked up, catching his eye across the yard, and smiled the same smile that had captivated him on that hilltop in Rolling Creek, the same smile that greeted him each morning and bid him good night each evening. She said something to Emma, then made her way toward the porch, her skirt swishing through the tall grass. "What are you thinking about so seriously, husband?" she asked as she climbed the steps to join him, reaching out to smooth James's unruly hair. "Just counting my blessings," Owen replied, wrapping his free arm around her waist and drawing her close, and thinking about how sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful stories. Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, her arm circling his waist. "Our story is still being written," she reminded him softly. "Every day, every moment together. And it just keeps getting better," Owen agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Emma came running up the path, her dark hair so like her mother's flying behind her, her green eyes a perfect match for Katherine's sparkling with excitement. "Papa, Mama, I found a butterfly. Come see." Owen and Katherine exchanged a smile, then followed their daughter into the yard, hand in hand, continuing the journey they had begun that day at the Hargrove place, a journey of love, family, and a happiness neither had dared to imagine before finding each other on the wild frontier of Montana.